After receiving about 4% of the vote in the lower house in 2022, you will not be seeing the United Australia Party's name on the ballot at this federal election. Clive Palmer has failed in his High Court bid to get that party re-registered after he voluntarily deregistered it following the 2022 election. Joining us to chat about this is Six News GovCheck editor Stuart Jeffrey, the host of Between Parks Place and Capitol Hill here on Six News. Nice to chat, Stuart.
Thank you.
So, from the outset, right, he voluntarily deregistered it, right? This was not a loss of membership thing. This was not a failure to respond to a notice thing. They deregistered it. Why? Did we find out anything in this court case about why they would do that when you would surely think they would know that they can't re-register it for this election?
No, unfortunately, they did not disclose to the court why they did that. I presume it's some sort of technical advantage of some sort. I don't know what it is. Potentially looking at doing the Clive and Pauline party. Potentially, I'd say it's a political move. But I'm not sure why they made that call.
Now,
And
obviously,
frankly, I don't think many other people are.
yeah, I have really no clue. I think they mentioned something about finances, but I think the AEC said there's no real financial thing. And then also, um, respectfully, Clive Palmer has a lot of money, right? So I didn't think that'd be a big issue. Um, it's interesting. The requirement, obviously, for federal party registration is 1,500 members. If you've got a parliamentary member setting that up, and they have Ralph Babet, you don't have a membership requirement, but there is still a time frame for it to be publicly advertised and for it to actually appear on the electoral roll. They don't have a lot of time now, do they?
No, well, basically their options are, because I know they have a number of parties trademarked. Most of them are a variation of the Teals, except for, as I said, the Clive and Pauline party. And following this judgment, I don't think they can even have any success with Teals. Because people will remember before the 2022 federal election, the Lib Dems got in trouble for having Liberal Democrats. They were forced to change their name to the Libertarian Party. After this ruling, where the court endorsed that judgment, it appears that even calling yourself the Teal Party would be enough to be caught in the scope of that provision and not be able to use that name.
It's interesting there then that teals wouldn't be allowed because and obviously while it's the subject of much, controversy about kind of the way Climate 200 funds candidates, there is no teal party on the register. So why exactly would they not be allowed to use something that is not currently in use by another party? Whereas obviously, the Liberal Party and the Liberal Democrats were both registered parties.
I mean, sure, it would definitely be more arguable. Um, but the court here tended to reinforce it. Unfortunately, we do not have the full judgment of the full reasons. We have the transcript, and we know that the court unanimously ruled against the UAP on every single claim that was brought forward. The court didn't give full reasons because they're aware of the upcoming election. So definitely on that front. Of course, there were three judges who were dissented in Roddick. Chief Justice Kiefel and Justice Keane have both since retired. Only Gageler, who is now Chief Justice, is on the court. So 6 against 1. So Roddick will definitely be upheld, and that's what we've kind of the vibe we've gotten from this case as well, based on the transcript alone, of course.
Yeah, and I mean, look, after the years they've spent on the rebrand, I don't think the Libertarians are going to be eager to switching back to the LDP anytime soon. In relation to this case with Palmer, was there any other precedents set? There's been some interesting, other cases of parties that have potentially confusing names. I think the other big one at the moment, which is kind of ongoing, is Democratic Labor, which is on the ballot as Labor DLP versus obviously Australian Labor, and that has been a bit of a controversial thing for a while now.
Well, there have been a string of these cases. Of course, I mentioned Roddick being the most recent one, of course, before this one. But you had Mulholland, which I believe was 2004, which was its DLP bringing a case against restrictions, and they also lost that case as well. So there's a precedent here that the High Court has relied on, and the Commonwealth government made it out to the court that if you rule against if you go rule in favor of the UAP here, then you have to go and revisit all those older cases. And Roddick is 3 years ago. So the High Court is very reluctant to revisit a case just as fresh as that. But of any new developments, is definitely we have the option. Of course, this is all about the implied freedom of political communication. People who read Commonwealth knowledge will know that we talk about it a lot there. But in short, the question is there it does the scope of this, which the basic understanding of it is equal opportunity to engage in political discourse in Australia because of being a democracy. And one question that the court might comment on, we're not sure, but the court might comment on whether or not there's a informed choice power in there as well, a power to vote for have an informed choice on the ballot to vote for people based on the party, based on what they stand for. And that would then give the candidates freedom of association to associate with whichever party they wanted that back their values. That could be a backdoor for the UAP. Of course, the court might comment on that. It won't be definitive. It could be used again in the future, but for the time being, it does not resolve this case. But it is definitely something interesting that could be used in the future.
Just quickly, and I'm not sure it's a priority for the legislation agenda federally at the moment. Do we anticipate the potential for the registration laws to be kind of reviewed here, specifically the part about not being able to re-register a party with the same or similar name in the same electoral cycle, which is obviously the law that kind of tripped up the UAP here?
Look, I think this case alone won't be enough. We do have of course, the case on that's been brought very recently against Victorian laws, which were brought in would limit political donations to independents of the minor parties. If that gets struck down by the High Court, there's definitely a high chance of that getting struck down, and there is of legislation here being struck down. Then potentially, if we're looking at reforms, of course, that being Victorian law, but that can still be extended to federal laws that have similar provisions on donations. Of course, the High Court been very, very favourable to donation laws. They've upheld three claims brought by New South Wales unions for donations towards Labor. So that's probably an option there. But in and of itself, this case isn't enough to prompt any reform. And as you mentioned, the UAP only has one centre. So even if Roth Babbitt pushed it, it wouldn't really get through.